I'm kidding.
I have a question for you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because you've said the person said that Islam is a form of idolatry. How is that?
So I believe that. It's not just my opinion. The Ron also taught. I mean, I have a whole video. Just type in Islam is a Zora, and I bring down probably like 5 or 6.
No, Rabbi, he's asking you. He's asking you, maybe coming from the religion itself. You can tell him, look, you're Jewish, and you, by your Judaism, you can interpret it that way because they don't. They have a new book, right? They have the not
Right.
new book. Let's say their book is 5 million years old behind time, but they have the Quran, and you're Jewish, and the holiest book by you is and there's Moses, and there is no more prophets. So they believe in it, and you don't. So you can tell them, look, according to Judaism, because according to religion, Islam is the most pure monotheistic faith we have.
Mhm.
Um, but the question is if that's the aspiration or if that's the goal for us
No,
to become monotheist.
I'm trying to
But
respond
he's
from a Jewish perspective. I mean,
yeah, but
from
he
a
see
halachic
he sees
perspective.
it from he sees it from philosophical plus coming from a lens of Islam.
Mhm.
And he's looking at you and he's like, how do you justify saying that? And you're like, well, if you Islam,
So then he's
well,
not
if
going to understand if I respond because I'm going to respond from a Jewish perspective.
you
You're like,
you
No,
could
I
that's
mean,
tell
I mean,
him,
it's fine. It's fine from a Jewish
okay.
perspective. Fine. I mean, just for it, and I would like to listen to that too.
So the reason it's an interesting question is because of the Rambam, right? And we always go back to at least I always go back to the Rambam. He's that influential because he was the first one to ever say that Islam is not idolatry. I mean, I don't even think it was brought up much. He's famous for saving the Yemenites from basically allowing themselves to be killed because the rabbis in around Yemen were telling them that it's better to be killed than convert to Islam. So then the Rambam stepped in. Now there's even stories that the Rambam converted to Islam too. But there's a lot of stories about the Rambam that aren't really accurate. And then he had someone murdered because they were going to snitch out that he was really a secret practicing Jew or something like that. However, it's a bit simplistic to say that only because you happen to worship one God, that does not make you an idolater. It's true that makes you a monotheist, but you could be a monotheist and still be an idolater from a Torah perspective. If you believe the turtle is God, right? One turtle, mom is just one, still an idolater. It's still avodah zarah. So I mean, sometimes I think that maybe the Rambam didn't really write these things.
it's apostasy. That was
No,
the
but the
point
thing is
was
that but the thing is, Rabbi, I mean, it's very clear for you that the claim of the Muslims is that actually they worship this same God. So it's nothing like the turtle or some other God,
No, I know,
or
but the
So
only
I
way
mean,
you
like your
know who you
claim is
worship is what that God expects from you, right? I mean, you could claim to worship my same God, but if my God tells you to keep the Torah and their God tells you to keep the Quran and say that we corrupted the Torah, that itself, from a halachic perspective, becomes avodah zarah. See,
not
idolatry.
wait heresy, not idol worship. Heresy meaning
No, 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 no.
you're going
Okay,
actually
against
because
the
Rabbi, actually
rabbis.
such a claim,
no,
the claim that actually,
no, we're going against the Torah, not the
No,
rabbis.
you're
I mean, the
going
claim that
against the interpreters of the Torah. You're
yeah,
obviously not going
but
against the Torah.
Rabbi, I mean, if you have to be clear on that, if you want to use Rambam as a reference, then we could question, is Rambam an absolute authority?
I'm not
Yeah,
using Rambam as a reference.
yeah, but
I'm saying I
if you are
disagree with
to
him.
show, if you are to quote, for instance, like all the Talmud, the oral Torah, and the books, then I'm not aware of any creed having made the claim, which is now scientific, but still we can discuss that the Torah and the Torah, or even the oral Torah, it is, was corrupted other than Islam. So if Avodah Zarah would apply, it would apply to a category which is prior to Islam. So I
No,
don't
no,
see
no.
the link. Yeah,
All right, let me define what avodah zarah means in
the deeds
Hebrew.
of a foreigner.
To
Avodah Zarah, the
huh?
deeds of a foreigner.
Wait,
Literal
wait, hold on.
translation of it is that one.
Okay, you may know it. For those listening out there, idolatry is not a good translation for avodah zarah in Hebrew. Although I guess if you translate the word idolatry into Hebrew, it would be like avodat pesilim, the worshiping of statues. So literally, avodah zarah means foreign or strange worship. Any worship that's not sanctioned by the Torah. So worship doesn't really mean worship how Christians think it means. It means actually doing something that God requires you to do. Keeping the mitzvot is how we worship God. That's the avoda that he requires from us. So like if your God requires something else, then you're serving God in a weird manner. It's muzad, it's zara, it's foreign.
Right, right. I
So,
understand that. But
so
actually,
that's
we
why
can
it's technically avodah zara because it's a
right.
foreign way to serve God.
Yeah, but we can make actually we can make the reverse claim too, to the fact that actually the Jews for 2 millennia minimum do not uphold all of the halakha. They don't punish the adulterer, like someone who commits fornication.
Oh, we don't have a
They don't
court.
punish
That's
someone.
why. Because we're not able to. It's so different. I
No,
mean, God wanted it that way. That we're not allowed to put people to death without a court
but Rabbi, you know that actually the Jews stopped doing that before the destruction of the Second Temple,
because of
because
the
the Romans.
Romans.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure, and the court was still there. It was there. The court
because they
was
weren't
there.
able to do it. That's the thing. They wanted to do it. They can't do it. There's Jews who want to
That's
bring sacrifices
a
today. I mean, there's no
mitzvah which is
temple.
not observed. To just to state that one, and we can see
Huh?
many
There's
mitzvot.
many mitzvot that we can't keep because we're not
Sure.
both male and female, because we're not all priests. There's some mitzvot that are only applicable when they're applicable. There's no temple. As a matter of fact, by trying to put someone to death outside of the auspices of the Sanhedrin, you'd be breaking the Torah as well. So it's a catch-22. I mean, it's almost like a Christian idea. Well, you can't keep all the commandments nowadays. Well, this is not our first exile. That means we've been in this exact situation. We'll eventually be brought back and we'll be able to keep the Torah in a more complete manner. But it's not a contradiction. This occurred even in scripture when Jews were exiled and were brought back. God didn't say, while you were in exile, you didn't try to sacrifice in my name. It doesn't make any sense. He told us not to build Bamot outside of the base of Bechira, like the place that he chose. I don't.
So actually, if I got you, I mean, like you can correct me on that. But so Islam is not idolatry, as it is not. It does not involve the worshiping of idols, but avodah zarah from a Jewish perspective, because it just does not concur with all the mitzvot, or all of the Torah, the text of the Torah, and it also considers the Torah to be partially corrupted by scribes and rabbis. So is that the way you see it?
Correct. Although Islam does have things that the Talmud prohibited, there's this notion of the worship of Marculus. It says, I mean, Chazal talk about that one way that Marculus was worshipped was by throwing stones at it. It was basically a mound that you would throw stones at. We see this, I mean, in the Hajj. We see that Shiites also cut themselves for the dead, right? I mean, for Ali. I mean, there's things that clearly have roots in traditional idolatry. They could claim to worship our God, but just because it's the same word, Allah, Eloah, doesn't mean it's the actual same God. It's a different, this God expects something else. It doesn't matter what you call him. El was also a Canaanite God, also. I mean, no one's going to say it's the same God.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's not a problem. The thing is
Right? So
that
it's a
actually,
different religion. I mean, it's essentially idolatry.
no,
Not the worship of statues, but from a Jewish perspective.
no. First of all, I mean, like the argument of the Judaism or Islam having some links with pre-existing religions, it could apply to Islam and Judaism, as a matter of fact, and you're very aware of that. I mean, like if you are to look at this from a scientific perspective, there are things in the Judaism that actually reminiscent of all other Canaanite neighboring
Sure.
religions.
Sure.
So, but the idea is that actually the of course, I mean, like the difference, and maybe I think you try in your efforts. I've come across your videos on YouTube before. You try to make Judaism universal. I would say again, or universal. Period. Islam, of course, the perspective of God in Islam is that the God is the God of alamin, of all the peoples. In Judaism, the God is actually a God of a people.
That's not true.
Uh, I
That's
mean,
not true. I mean, it's
yeah,
a
of course, it's
philosophy.
not true from your perspective. I that
No,
because
from the Torah
yeah. So
perspective, on Mount Sinai, there stood a mixed multitude. Anyone who's ever written about that event, i.e., the rabbis in the Talmud, teach that the mixed multitude outnumbered the Hebrews. Now, there are midrashim that go both ways. Some say that they were bad, some say they were good. But regardless, it seems like they were absorbed into the Jewish people, and then they continued being Israel. Israel is a philosophy that anyone could buy into. I mean, it's a people, yes, but it's not limited to flesh and blood. So this is why, if it was the way the Black Hebrews teach it, that it's only via blood, then I would agree with you. Muhammad could have become a Jew. As a matter of fact, our tradition teaches that he technically would have been from some monotheistic understanding, because we believe that Ishmael did do tshuva, possibly, when he buried his father with.
Rabbi
No,
Asher,
yeah, go ahead.
isn't it Ishmael has the divine access based on the Abrahamic relationship and covenant? You can see that Israel and Ishmael as a God behind their names. So is he not accessing the divine access?
El doesn't mean the God of Israel. El just means powerful one. The Sanhedrin, that were also called Elohim, Elohim, whatever
No,
you
but
want to
the
have.
but doesn't he have the access to the divine based on Abrahamic relationship and covenant?
The Zohar says that. I mean, the Zohar says that. which is one proof the Zohar wasn't written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because it makes reference to Muslims. But it talks about because they received circumcision at the age of 13 or something like that, they're set apart from all the other religions, are going to be allowed to exist till the end days or something like that. And it also, I think, mentions crusades also. I mean, I don't believe that the Rashbi wrote the Zohar anyways. I'm
I
sure
mean,
there's rabbis that talk about this, but it's not set
yeah.
in stone. Like maybe, sure, why not?
Rabbi, I mean, the thing is that actually, when I'm saying that, I mean, like the cliche would be, although I understand that your perspective is that Judaism is universal, and I think that, I mean, explains your effort to convert and to tell people about the reality of Judaism, something that many Jews don't busy themselves with. Actually, it comes from the Torah itself. I mean, like we've got the episode of Moses going to meet the Pharaoh, not to tell him about who's God or to convince him to worship God or to convince the Egyptians just to follow the true path of God, but just to save his own people. And actually, when he describes God, he describes the gods of the Hebrews. He doesn't describe the God of the universe. He doesn't remind Pharaoh that it's the God who created him,
Maybe
namely the
this is
Pharaoh.
before the Torah was given, though.
Yeah,
It means there was no universal message
yeah.
yet.
I mean, I'm just inviting you to see the difference of the perspective. We've got the same episode in Quran when it comes to this encounter between Moses and Pharaoh. He still asks Pharaoh to let his people go, but he tries to preach the true faith of God to Pharaoh himself. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, if the truth is universal, it has to be preached to everybody. So that's also a slight difference, but I understand your perspective of Judaism being a universal religion. I think you do understand that it's something that comes as strange for even us who are non-Jews, because we don't hear that much. I don't know to what extent other rabbis would agree with you about it, but it's interesting. I respect that.
It's not foreign at all in the Christian world, but the average Christian has been walking around with the Bible under his arm. He relates to the characters and, like, you know what? I was also taken out of Egypt. God's speaking to me. They believe that they're the branch grafted in. To Christian ears, it sounds very welcoming and familiar. Perhaps to Islamic ears, just because they've been teaching it so long that just like Moses was the prophet to the Jews, Muhammad was a prophet to the rest of the world. It's a different perspective for sure, but that's the problem that Islam has, because they feel some obligation to bring the whole world to Islam. I don't feel a similar obligation. I believe it's a good idea, but I think my job is to encourage them to consider becoming Jewish. Now, that's a big difference than feeling you have an obligation to institute a global caliphate where if you don't convert, you're basically either a second class citizen or mistreated and forced
Sure,
to
but that's
visit
different.
back.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about different categories here because, I mean, it would be very interesting to discuss with you what is the status of a non-Jew in a Jewish polity according to halakha. Okay, and
Uh,
you go aleph, bet, gimel. That's what a non-Jew is entitled to. I mean, you may have heard, because I've heard.
uh,
So you may have heard people stating that in Eretz Israel there should be no non-Jew in Eretz Israel. I mean, you must have heard that. I mean, it
no,
wouldn't
I
come
never
as a
heard of that.
surprise to you.
I've
I've
never
heard
heard
it
of that.
in Hebrew, in
No.
Israeli TV from us. I don't recall the name of the rabbi, but it's something I've heard really. Like I heard it say. I don't know if it is commonplace. I don't think, maybe it's extreme, but it's an opinion that is there. The thing is that if we are to compare the
Seems
like the
unlikely.
so Mikhail, you talking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, you want to say something to that?
I do not think that there is any large contingent of Jews or Israelis that want Israel to be populated only by Jews.
No, I'm not saying that it's a will of the Jews. That would be very different. I'm talking about the technicality of it. I mean, I'm talking about before the destruction of the Second Temple, there have been non-Jews living in a Jewish polity. Let us say at the time of the Maccabees, or maybe I don't know, maybe by the time of
There have
the,
always
the
been
first
non-Jews living in the
first
land of
kingdom. Yeah,
Israel.
sure. They existed. That's evident. I mean, like it's normal. It's the Middle East. You always have everybody everywhere. But the idea, what was there? I mean, like how the Jewish law perceived them. If they are, for instance, to kill a Jew,
No,
the
you're right.
injustice of
You're
Adam.
right.
How would we, I
Wait,
mean, of course, it
We
will be a
have rules.
discrimination. It will be a discrimination.
Listen.
Yeah.
If you have a particular case that you would like to ask us what our legal rulings would bear, we'll answer you. Like you're talking about what were the legal rulings we had 2,000 years ago with different tribes that lived and interacted with us, sometimes in a good way,
Cool.
sometimes in a bad
Yeah.
way. We have records of the stuff we did. We also have records of how we would deal with it.
Exactly.
And there were
But that's the point.
disputes and disagreements,
No,
and
no, but that's
sometimes
the point. No,
wars
no,
were like
that's
the
the
big
point.
politics of the day.
I say that.
I don't think there is a point.
No,
all
no,
right. Wait.
because maybe you
Hold on,
came
hold on.
later. Maybe you came late. You didn't listen to what
Okay.
I brought that spot up because the rabbi
I think you
here.
have a good point. But I always said that it's very similar. That the status of a noide is really on the same level as those that are dhimmi.
Yeah,
Uh,
something like that. Yeah,
No,
sure. Yeah. So I brought it up because
no,
you brought the fact that there are
no,
demis in
that's
Islam.
incorrect.
well, it is correct. I mean, the notion of a ger
Really? Go ahead,
toshav.
prove that.
All right, it's actually worse
Okay, prove
because
it.
a ger toshav is put to death for breaking 7 laws with only one witness and with no warning. Okay, put to death
What?
for stealing. I mean, for stealing anything less than a shova pruta.
I'm sorry. I asked you to prove something, and now you're just saying things? Do you have a source?
Sure, the Rambam Hilchos Malachim chapter 8 or 10, 8 or 10.
And this
This is
says
common
what?
knowledge that a Gentile is put to death for breaking
For.
any one of the 7 Noahide laws.
Okay, so you're saying that a non-Jew has the status of a dhimmi.
No, I'm saying that a Noahide in Judaism, the notion of a Ger Toshav is
Yeah,
very
I
similar.
understand.
Is
You're
very
saying
similar
that
to the notion of dhimmi.
are the Jews able to put him to death?
Nowadays, no one is putting anyone to death because we don't have a court. Okay. When there was a court, now, honestly, I don't believe that the status of a Ger Toshav ever really existed. It was hypothetical, although
First
there
of
were
all,
Gentiles living in the land.
I don't know why you're saying Ger Toshav because you're definitely mistaken, right? Because your example was a non-Jew that violates the laws. Ger Toshav means like wonderful stranger, and it's a good person. It's a person
No,
that settles within your land and
what are you
lives well.
talking about,
So
man?
a
I mean,
Ger
you're completely
Toshav
off.
would never commit a crime. That's where it makes no sense for you to say a Ger Toshav that steals. That's why it was confusing to me.
A Ger Toshav means a stranger that resides. That's all it means. It doesn't mean Ger
No, but
Tzedek or
resides
someone
with
special.
you, like as a friend.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, a Ger Toshav is lauded in the literature.
Or you're making this stuff up, okay?
No,
I mean, I
not at
quoted the
all.
Rambam where it says in the Rambam, but
I'll show you the
that a Ger
Rambam of the Ger
Toshav is
Toshav.
bound to keep the 7 laws of Noah. And if he
That's right.
fails to keep the 7 laws of Noah, he's put to death.
So if you were a criminal,
You're a criminal as a Ger Toshav if you break any one of the laws of Noah.
so like if you murdered somebody,
That definitely would make you a criminal. But
right?
even
And you're saying what? I shouldn't punish that guy?
that's what you're saying.
What?
You just said that a Ger Toshav doesn't get punished because
No,
he's an
I mean,
upstanding
Rabbi,
citizzen.
I
No,
have
I
a
didn't
question.
say that. Where?
If you allow me to, I think I'll have an easy question. We make things clear.
What are
If
you trying to say,
that's the Jewish
Rabbi?
law,
I think
that's
you're
the Jewish
completely
law.
ignorant. And if you would
No,
like to debate me on my channel, I would love to make a spectacle out of
but
you.
anyways,
Debate me on what? What do you want to debate me, Rabbi?
See? I know that voice.
Michael is a
Okay.
nice dude.
All right.
I just wanted to say something. For instance, if someone,
You are a clod,
Michael,
however.
could you just answer to that, or whoever on stage, if a Jew kill, let's say willingly, according to Jewish law, a non-Jew, would he be killed for a non-Jew, for having killed a non-Jew according to halakha?
No,
Yeah, of course.
No,
That's
no.
murder.
well, so you're ignorant of
What
halakha
the
as
fuck
well.
is wrong with you
Okay.
people?
All right. The Rambam mentions that he gets judged by the Beis Din Shomala, but not on earth. That's
If a
unfortunately
Jew kills a non-Jew, he's
correct.
not obligated to be killed. What's
Unfortunately,
his punishment?
unfortunately,
What's his punishment?
halakha doesn't mention a punishment. I
Does
mean,
he get lashes?
it doesn't say.
Does he have to bring a carbon of some kind?
It doesn't say. I mean, there's a
So
lot of things that are.
according to you, the Jewish law is that a Jew can walk up to a non-Jew, kill him, and there are no capital punishments, no punishments of any kind that any court in the land of Israel will lodge against this murderer, this very, very clear murderer.
I mean, what's the demagoguery?
One
I mean,
second,
what's
I
the
just wanna be
emotion?
clear.
I mean,
I
it
wanna
sounds
be
like you're
clear.
having a baby.
You think that is the law?